Hello, this is Mallory again, and today I will be going over Chase's issue analysis for Group M. And Group M consists of myself, Jesus, Jeff, and Alex. Now, I will cover the accounting function, Alex will cover operations, Jesus will cover finance, and Jeff is going to cover marketing. Now, before I get into the actual issue, I just want to go over briefly the accounting's role in banking. Now, accounting and banking is pretty much standard to any industry's accounting's role. They have the responsibility to classify and record financial transactions. They have to audit, prepare financial statements, but most importantly, they have to adhere to the regulatory and compliance standards. Now, a bank accountant has the service of doing the previously mentioned responsibilities not only to the bank, but also to the customers and investors that hold accounts at that certain bank. Now, onto the accounting issue. KYC, know your customer. Now, Madoff had been a respected broker since sometime in the 60s, and Chase wanted to build a relationship with him. They wanted to get his business, but they did so solely based on Madoff's reputation. They didn't do their due diligence, and in my opinion, this was Chase's first failure. Now, part of the reason Chase wanted to do business with Madoff is because he had substantial influence in certain markets that Chase wanted to gain ground in. And he was being courted by a lot of bankers. I mean, the guy, he pretty much helped to create NASDAQ. Therefore, people were fighting for his business. And Chase wanted to be at the top of that line. They wanted to get this guy in their hands, in their banks. But I say sometime in the 80s or 90s, I don't know what happened to Madoff. He, for some reason, decided to be a damn crook. And he started all of these fraud accounts, AKA the Ponzi scheme. And unfortunately for Chase, he ran this scheme through their bank accounts. And it lasted for nearly 2 decades. Now, why was this an issue for Chase? Obviously, it violated ethics and corporate social responsibility. I mean, it is known that Chase had been well aware of this fraud before Madoff was even arrested. Throughout the course of the fraud, there were many alerts and red flags that were raised and ignored by the accountants and other departments within Chase. The accountant department, they pretty much turned a blind eye to what was going on. And they should have been the first to notify the proper authorities, the government, someone of what was going on. Now, we all know that Chase has bent over backwards to publicize their high standard and integrity. They wanted to portray that they know what's going on in their banks. We can trust them. Our money is safe. But the massive cover-ups and lies of Madoff's Ponzi scheme, it contradicts everything that stood for it, contradicted their vision and mission statement. Now, this global giant, being Chase, spent millions of dollars on IT security and protocols to detect this type of fraud. But they claim it failed. It didn't work. Really, Chase? You spend all this money to detect this type of fraud and it failed? I mean, I'm not believing it, and I hope you're not either. Was this situation unique to Chase? No, not really. Ponzi schemes happen all the time, and they need a bank to run that scheme through. It just so happened Chase was unfortunate that they were involved in one of the biggest Ponzi schemes known to date. Their response, they tried to cover it up. Let's face it, banks don't commit the crimes. The bankers do. And Chase knew about this because they eventually stopped offering Bernie's or Madoff's investments to their customers, and they urged their employees to keep quiet about it. So right there, that tells you that Chase was trying to cover it up. Now, my recommendations for Chase on internal policies, they need to expand their procedures on guarding against this type of money laundering in the future. I mean, get a compliance officer that's strictly assigned to this type of fraud. And if necessary, go get an outside third-party security company to assist. I mean, come on, Chase, let's get it done. Organizational systems, they need to really spend the money. They have the money. Let's go out there and revolutionize their accounting compliance operations, perhaps through data mining, which can be designed to learn and detect a certain type of fraud that's continuous, like it was with this Ponzi scheme. That'll help them in going forward with their operations. And most importantly to me is the individual responsibilities. Chase needs to have a continued employee training program to train their employees on their social and ethics responsibility to their customers, and perhaps bring awareness to the SEC's whistleblower program. I mean, let's face it, I'm pretty sure every company has some type of fraud. Maybe not this big, but the employees are always scared to go to the proper authorities in fear of retaliation. So if Chase has some type of program where the employees can feel safe and not be retaliated against, I think this would have changed, because then I feel like the fraud would have been reported immediately. And this concludes my accounting issue for Chase. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jesus, and I will be discussing the JP Morgan Chase financial issue regarding the subprime mortgage crisis. So to begin where this started, lenders wanted to make a high return in a short amount of time, and so they turned towards home mortgages. So what banks did is that they were securitizing loans. They sold these, once they turned these loans into this, let's say, one huge cake, they sold these pieces called shares to investors, and that's what they were buying. Well, once they ran out of cake, they felt they should go ahead and make more, securitize more of these loans, but instead this time, not, let's say, buy the best material to make the cake. They did subprime lending. They sold loans to people who knew that could not afford these loans, and in turn sold these securities to these investors, which they knew were not going to make any money. So let's go ahead and discuss that. Why is it an issue? Well, it's an issue because, as I said, these banks and other banks did it too. JP Morgan did not verify these loaners' income. They did not verify if they had a job, and they didn't even check their credit score. When they sold them, when they gave them the loan, they also gave them an adjustable rate, meaning they could afford this home for, maybe a short amount of time, and then later this rate ballooned up to an amount they could not even afford, and when they would make a payment, they'd be paying on the interest and not even making a dent on the principal. Another issue that they were doing is misrepresenting the documents. They made it seem, when they sold these loans, when they sold these shares of the securities to the investors, they made it seem like they were going to make money, and in fact, it was all bad practice from the very beginning, from when they sold these loans to when they sold these shares of the security to these investors. So is this issue unique to JP Morgan Chase? No. Many other banks are doing this at this time. In addition, credit rating agencies were giving them the best possible rating. They said that these mortgages were debt safe. And the reason they did that is because these MBS, or mortgage-backed securities, at the time was something new, and there was no historical data. So instead, what they did do is use historical data on loaning, on when people, you give a regular loan out, and they said, well, people have paid back these loans. It's foolproof, which is not the case. So housing prices rise, and in a bank's mind, they're thinking, the prices of homes are only increasing if this one person can't afford their home and goes into foreclosure. We can resell that same home higher. But that's not what happened. The lax lending and the low interest rates drove the housing prices even higher, which made the MBS and other CDOs seem like an even better investment. So if borrowers defaulted, then the bank would still have the house. That's not what happened. Instead, it created this huge, huge bubble. And what happens to bubbles? They eventually pop once they get too big, which leads into this huge crisis. So a lot of banks filed bankruptcy. Banks were sold. They lost their money because these people could not afford these homes. What was the company's response to this issue? Well, JP Morgan did admit that its employees were aware that the mortgages it sold did not comply with standard underwriting guidelines, and that they misled investors by bundling these mortgages and securities that they knew were hardly fit for sale. As a result, fines were paid to the government, to those customers, and there was also a law act, the Frank-Dodd Act, which made banks they enforced that banks be more transparent in their practices to prevent this from happening again. And of course, after the issue, the CEO, James Dimon, said, "We're pleased to have concluded this extensive agreement." And JP Morgan also feels that the settlement terminates all pending civil enforcement investigations into residential mortgage securities. So the CEO felt that by paying these fines, that they have washed their hands clean of everything that has happened. Recommendations. Well, some of my recommendations would be to hire independent contractors, and their main role would be to oversee and monitor these loans, making sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. We're going to make sure that we check their credit, we check their spouse's credit, we're going to check to see that they have a stable working history. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and place fines on these banks, at least individual branches, to make sure that they continue these good practices. Limiting the sales of mortgages. What that means is, instead of selling these selling these mortgages to other investors, the bank has to wait. If the bank feels so confident that you feel you're gonna repay that loan, then the bank needs to keep it for at least a couple of years before they sell it to someone else. Next would be to identify perverse incentives. And what these are is, it's a negative effect opposite that what was intended. So because mortgages were being sold to people that could not afford these bills. But as a result, the more that they sold, they got bonuses. And that needed to stop a long time ago, because what that ended up doing is that they started encouraging these bad practices for people that could not even afford. They would not even do the background checks, and they would still get bonuses just because they sold a loan to a house. And also removing moral hazards. This is when one person takes on more risk because someone else bears that burden. So kind of going back to what Chase did, they sold these loans knowing that this person could not afford it, but they knew right away they would turn around and sell the security to an investor, and that would wash away the blame and have someone else bear that burden of that risk. Next, my last recommendation would be to terminate those employees responsible who knew firsthand what they were doing. Whoever's name was on that bottom line. That way, that would show other employees that they mean business. And lastly, the related business strategy concept would be business ethics, and have this company operated in an ethical manner the effect may not have been so widely felt around the nation, and instead made JP Morgan Chase look like an ethical leader that champions integrity. All right, that's been it. I've been Jesus. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Rocha, and I'm going to be talking to you today about Chase issue analysis, particularly their marketing position. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how much money Chase has spent back in 2013 just on media. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you about that is so we can figure out what their issue is. So here's a small video here about Serena Williams and a little commercial that Chase has. So you can tell that they've spent a lot of money to get their point across. And this is one of the things that I feel like their issue is. So here's a little short video of Serena Williams.
Mastery is a journey of continuous improvement.
Top athlete in tennis right now.
From triumph or triumph, tennis legend Serena Williams moves forward. And with the Chase mobile app, we're on the same path, offering innovative and convenient ways to bank. Easy to use Chase technology for whatever you're trying to master.
So innovation and technology is definitely something that, you got the point across from that. But the fact that they're spending so much money just to have her on there is the reason why I wanted to show you guys this video. They spent this much money on this, but they have no social presence. And they had a horrible fiasco on Twitter back in 2013. And that's the issue that I wanted to talk to you about. Back in 2013, they decided to have a little live questionnaire feed that they brought in Vice Chairman Jimmy Lee, and they wanted to ask the audience more business-minded questions. So they wanted to have some kind of participation with the audience. And these are some of the questions that they decided to write back. What's your favorite type of whale? Has nothing to do with the finance industry whatsoever. Is your chief compliance officer alive? Has anyone checked to see if he's even in the office? So you can see that some of the hatefulness that was coming from some of these hashtags, just Jamie Dimon pet a small cat and laugh ominously while he's ruining poor people's lives. And can I have my house back? Of course, you can tell this was a horrible disaster, and JP Morgan Chase had to end up deleting this hashtag and the conference that they were supposed to have with the vice chairman on this. So as you can see, as much money as they spend on their media period, they have no social presence. So that's the reason why I felt like this is one of the issues. And it gave them a negative imprint in social media. And they already have the brand recognition, which is Chase, and they're known all over the world. They have $2.3 trillion in assets, and they're number one in that, but they're not number one in social media. And, right now we have on our phones, our society is on the phones constantly, and we're looking at live feeds and we're trying to get more educational stuff. And I think Chase can do a better, there's a better way of doing it on their part. And is it unique to Chase only? Well, let's put it in a little bit more perspective and find out where the other two major banks are. So Wells Fargo is ranked number 3rd on Facebook and 4th on Twitter. And Bank of America is ranked 6th on Facebook and 9th on Twitter. And this was all written by Gene Roberts in a column that he wrote on the Charlotte Observer. And Chase was nowhere to be found on this. So as you can see, Chase does not have an imprint in social media, and that's definitely a major issue for the number one bank in the United States right now. So what are our recommendations? Of course, we have to improve social media reputation. And how are we going to do that? I feel like if you tell more live stories, you can relate to the customer a lot more. And maybe having some video seminars instead of a live feed like Twitter where they were asking questions, maybe they can get some of the questions from Facebook or Twitter, but have it more to where you're in control of the situation and ask certain questions that you feel the audience needs to know. Also, they do a lot of charitable events, and I think that's something that they should have on Facebook constantly to let people know that they have this social and corporate responsibility. And we'll talk a little bit more about those two. And consumer engagement, I feel like them being able to do a little bit more, because they have social networking with a lot of other industries, they can bring that back and put it on social media, let know the reason why the banking industry is going in this direction. Why are they lowering interest rates or raising interest rates? I think that's definitely something that's very informative, and there are changes that our bank is doing that they should be able to put on social media, so consumers know what's going on, and maybe creating something like, this is the reason why I love Chase Bank, or things of that nature, in order to try to put that imprint of social media back, so consumers can understand where Chase is heading on it. And of course, they have their social responsibility. I think this is a great thing for them to be able to put back into social media, where veterans are invested $45 million in programs and initiatives to get them back to civilian lives. They're getting with a variety of different other countries and companies, and created veteran jobs missions. So this is definitely something that I feel like they should be able to put on social media and get really positive impact on that, because they're giving back. Also, underprivileged youth. They're investing $5 million in the next 2 years in summer education programs for 75% of minorities that are going to benefit from this. And I think that's something that people want to know, and people should know about this, that lets people know, hey, Chase is doing something positive, and have that imprint in social media. Also, their corporate social responsibility. They have $100 million invested in Detroit, and no other bank is doing something like that right now. So I think that's definitely a major thing that they should be able to be putting on social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, and let people know what positive things are coming from Chase. And of course, they're a differentiation strategy. They have the conveniences, they have the technology, and they're already 2.3 trillion combined assets. So they're number one in that, but yet social media is the one thing that they're lacking. I definitely think that's going to be their in order to tip the scales in their favor, this is where they're going to have to differentiate themselves from their competition, is going to be this last key thing. Because they already have the new Chase ATMs, they have the mobile banking, Chase Quick Pay. Everybody knows, you've seen this on the video that I showed you with Serena Williams. They put that on the media, and everybody knows that these are the great things that they have. But the social media, where they need to put that presence in there, is not there right now. So in conclusion, I wanted to give you a little bit of idea of how much money they're spending right now. So they have $225 million in TV, $47 million in magazines, 18 million in newspapers, and 59 million on the internet, which is not in social media, and $1.48 billion in others. So I think with the amount of money that they're putting into this, social media should be a huge presence for Chase Bank, especially as big as they are. They're on the Fortune 500 company. So this is definitely one of the things that I think that they need to change. And now I'm going to pass this over to Alex, and he's going to be talking to you about operations.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Ledesma, and I'm going to be discussing with you the JP Morgan Chase operational issue that I researched. The issue and discussion that had to do with operations was more on the side of human resources. Now, the situation that came up was that a few years back, there was a termination of a mid-level executive in JP Morgan Chase by the name of Linda Almonte. She brought to light information about credit card records. Basically, she brought up the fact that there was a failure to reconcile inconsistent past due balances. There was pressure from management to collect debts in the absence of complete or accurate records. And she also identified that there was robo-signing of affidavits that bring into question the legal integrity of Chase's consumers. Now, as you can imagine, a mid-level executive or a mid-level manager bringing all of these things to the attention of upper level or higher level management that might not want these things brought to light would cause a little bit of issue. So Ms. Almonte was terminated. And after she was terminated, she filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Chase because she truly felt that they terminated her for being a whistleblower, and then they tried to cover up what it was they were doing. She contacted regulators, she contacted other government officials to bring to light what they had done, and it turned into a long legal battle, which ultimately ended up crippling Ms. Almonte. She was never able to get another job in the banking industry, and she completely went broke during this legal battle with Chase. But what she was doing was far more important. She was pointing out operational shortfalls where the company was choosing revenue over ethical standards, and she was terminated for it. So there's a couple of problems and business strategy concepts that were gone against when dealing with Ms. Almonte. And basically, there's things that Chase did that they could have done differently. There's some things that Chase did that they could have done better. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this here in a moment. This issue, dealing with operational human resources and kind of ethical standards, is definitely not an issue that is unique to JP Morgan Chase alone. Operational issues like this happen at lots of other banks around the country. You're constantly seeing news stories about issues that policies and procedures are broken or ethical standards are bypassed, and the banks are held responsible for it. A good example of this having happened recently is the scandal that everyone may have heard about on the news, where Wells Fargo employees were caught creating fake accounts in order to boost their numbers. This is obviously, again, an ethical issue, similar to the ethical issue that Chase encountered when terminating this employee for bringing up the issues with the credit card accounts. So definitely not an issue that is unique to Chase. It's an issue that is easily widely known in the financial industry. So what can Chase have done, or what can Chase do in order to avoid this issue or avoid it coming up in the future? Definitely, as what happened with the termination of Ms. Almonte, there needs to be new operational processes where the Chase legal team does more in-depth reviews of the credit card cases, similar to the ones that Ms. Almonte brought to the attention of the executive team. Obviously, several employees that were involved with the cover-up, with the initial wrongdoing, need to be terminated. Lawyers that were involved in these faulty processes also need to be terminated. Basically, you need to get rid of any employees that had anything to do with this unethical and dishonest behavior. And unfortunately, in this particular issue, there wasn't any termination of higher level executives. It seems like Chase has encountered many issues throughout the controversies that they've encountered, and they've managed time and time again to avoid the termination of higher level executives. But perhaps that is something that needs to happen in the future. It's possible that they may need to get rid of some high level executives in order to truly have a culture and a true change within their organization. So like I said, clean house, make sure the operational changes stick, and then make sure that you're following the ethical standards that are outlined on your own website. Chase has a very robust website that goes in depth about standards and policies and procedures. And it seems like some of the issues that have arisen, along with the case of Linda Almonte and how she was wrongfully terminated for bringing information to light, is one of those situations where I feel like she was definitely wrongfully terminated. And Chase definitely did not follow the ethical standards that are outlined on their own website. So definitely taking a look at the information that is there and making sure that they're following that to the T. So some of the business strategy concepts that we've reviewed in this course that resounded with this individual case, there may be some that were covered by my previous classmates. The concept of business ethics obviously comes to light. The concept of values, which are the beliefs, traits, and behavioral norms that the employees of the organization follow in order to represent the organization. So business ethics and values definitely came into question in this situation. But I think the main concept that struck a chord with me was the concept of corporate culture, and how corporate culture is basically the influence its work practices and style of operating has on employees and how they function. Now, if the employees in this specific situation had followed a more strict corporate culture and had actually followed an ethical and a moral corporate culture, then an issue like this wouldn't have happened, but that wasn't the case. So definitely the concept of corporate culture is one that truly needed to be followed more closely. And that is it for the issue surrounding operations and human resources. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your time.